Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Homeschooling with Zena. My name is Randy. I'm your host. So, yesterday we did Perseus, right? Perseus and Medusa. And today we are going to delve into the world of Hercules, the adventures of Hercules, the many labors of Hercules. So I hope you enjoy this. Now, as you see, this is lesson 11, part 2, and you may be wondering why I started from, I believe it was lesson 10. And that's because I just got the idea to do this online on YouTube about a week ago. So we're just finishing up the first grade world history, and soon I believe it will be March 15th, I will have the materials for the other lessons that we're going to do, or the other courses. So it's not only going to be history. I'll have to decide what I want to do, or what we want to do um, later on. I'm not terribly sure. I think maybe we would do language arts and history, or maybe phonics and history, or something like this. I'm not sure. But yeah, I hope you are enjoying these courses. I want to do this for long term. So regardless if we get a lot of subscribers or not, I will continue to document this on YouTube and continue to document the progress, because it has done wonders for my daughter. Zena, last year, she did not know how to read. So now she does. She didn't even understand English last year. And because of K-12, um, she can almost to the level of a native speaker now. And I have to contribute that to K-12. So today we're going to learn about the Hercules, or some people call it Heracles. So when I was growing up in America, I'm in China now. We used to pronounce it as Hercules, but then when I started traveling around the world, some people would pronounce it as Heracles. So we'll see how the reader is going to pronounce it. So let's get to it.
The Adventures of Hercules. Hercules was the strongest man in the world, the son of a god and a human being. You've already heard how gods and human beings could be friends, but the Greeks believed that a god might actually fall in love with the human, and they might marry and have a child. That's how they explained the great strength of Hercules. They said his father was Zeus, king of all the gods, and his mother, Princess Alcmena, was a human being. Now, it was obvious from the beginning of his life that Hercules was stronger than anyone else, and his mother, the princess, gave him some good advice early on. "Hercules," she told him, "you must always remember that the gods give us gifts for a reason. Your strength is your gift, and you must use it wisely, not to force others to do as you wish them to do, but to help others and bring good." And Hercules promised, "I will, mother." When he grew up, he tried to remember his mother's advice. But when he was about 18 years old, he grew angry with a man one day, and forgetting his own great strength, Hercules struck out at the man. Now remember, Hercules, with one blow of his fist, could shatter a wall. So you can imagine how he hurt this man. Afterwards, Hercules felt terrible, but there was nothing he could do to help the man. Hercules went to the temple of the god Apollo, god of wisdom and justice, and there the huge man got down on his knees and prayed to the god. "Oh, Apollo," said Hercules, Apollo, I have misused my gift, and I have hurt a man who did not deserve to be hurt. What can I do?" And the gods spoke to Hercules. "Hercules," said Apollo, "the first step on the path to doing right is to wish to do right. You have taken that first step, and it is true that you must learn to control your strength and your temper. Therefore, here is what you must do. Go to the south and find King Eurystheus, and work for him. Do all that he asks, whatever it may be, until you feel you can control your gift from the gods, your strength." And so Hercules went to work for King Eurystheus and did many jobs for him, which we call not the jobs, but the labors of Hercules. Now the first of these labors was, well, I'll let King Eurystheus tell you.
"Hercules, you shall go to the land of Nemea. There lives a huge golden lion, and this lion is terrorizing the people, not only because of his fierceness and his size, but because his skin is magical. It cannot be cut by metal or wood, and therefore arrows and spears and swords bounce off the hide of this lion. But you shall go and kill the Nemean lion, and to prove you have done so, you shall bring me its hide."
"Yes, your majesty," said Hercules. But on his way he thought, how am I going to kill a lion that I can't cut with a bow and arrow or a spear or a sword? When he got to Nemea, he found the area in which the lion liked to roam, and he hid by one of the main paths that the lion used, and waited among the trees. At last the lion came trotting along the pathway, and Hercules thought, I have nothing to lose. I'll try an arrow. And fitting an arrow to his bowstring, he pulled back and let loose. Whew! Went the arrow, and it struck the lion and bounced right off of him. The lion knew he was being attacked, and he spun around and saw Hercules there in the trees, and with a mighty roar, "Rah!" he rushed across the open space between them and leaped at the huge man. But Hercules was holding a club, his favorite weapon, and he struck the lion in the head. But remember the magic of the hide on the lion, and the club didn't kill the lion. In fact, the club shattered into 1,000 pieces, but at least the lion fell to the ground, and in that moment Hercules leaped upon the lion and began to wrestle with him. It was a terrible battle, but in the end, Hercules won. He could not cut the magic hide, but he squeezed the very life from the beast. "Well, that should have been the tough part, but it isn't," said Hercules. "How can I get the hide off of this lion to go share to the king? I've tried my knife, I tried my sword, and nothing works. I have an idea." And so he turned the claws of the Nemean lion back upon its own skin, and sure enough, the lion's own claws cut its skin. And he took the hide off of the lion, and he cleaned it, and he tanned it. But then he thought, this would be very useful if I could turn it into clothing. That would mean that arrows and spears and swords would bounce off of me. And so that's what Hercules did. He took the Nemean lion's skin, and he made it into an outfit for himself, with its arms as his sleeves, and its body around his body, and even left on the neck and the head to use as a hood in cold or rainy weather. And wearing the lion's skin, he went back to see King Eurystheus. Now Eurystheus saw what he thought was a huge lion walking on 2 legs coming right towards him, and being a coward, he spun around and ran back into his palace and slammed the gates shut. And then he climbed to the top of the highest tower and looked down. Hercules stood below, roaring with laughter as loudly as the lion had roared, and he said, "Well, your majesty, it appears that this is as close as you'd like to get to the skin of the Nemean lion. What do you have for me next?"
"Well," said King Eurystheus, "as a matter of fact, while you were away, a little something did come up. You shall kill the Hydra."
Now the Hydra was a huge dragon, and it had 9 necks. And if somehow you managed to cut one of the heads off one of the necks, 2 new heads grew where the old one had been, so you had only made your problem that much worse. And the middle head could not be killed at all. If that weren't bad enough, that immortal middle head breathed fire. Now this horrible beast lived in a large swamp, and it would come out in the early night and burn the villages nearby and kill the people or take their food. And they had asked King Eurystheus to send Hercules to help.
"And that is what you shall do,"
said the king. So off Hercules went. When he arrived at one of the villages near to the swamp, he said to the people, "You must help me to fight the Hydra."
"But we can't fight monsters. That's why we sent for you,"
said the villagers. No, you misunderstand. You must help me by making a weapon for me. Take all of your heaviest ropes and weave them into a great net, and then tie rocks around the edge of that net to make the net even heavier. Now, while you do that, I have something else to do." And Hercules went nearby to the mountains, and he searched there until he found a large cave. Then he gathered large boulders and rocks and set them in a pile outside the entrance to the cave and went back down to the village. "Oh, there's one thing more I'll need besides the net," said Hercules. "I'll need a torch, a long piece of wood with dried grass at the end that I can set on fire."
"You shall have whatever you ask for, Hercules, if only you can free us from the Hydra."
And Hercules went to sleep, because he decided he would need his strength for that night's fight. Sure enough, as darkness fell, there was a loud hissing sound from the swamp. And then suddenly the night lit up with fire. The Hydra was awake and coming. Hercules took the large net the villagers had made, and the torch which he lit now, and also, wearing his sword, he went out to fight the Hydra. The monster came for him, but while it was still too far away to burn him with its flame, Hercules took that net and began to swing it around in the air, as a cowboy would swing a lasso. Faster and faster and faster, and then he let it fly, and it spread open as it flew through the air and came down over the Hydra. Now you remember how heavy the ropes were, and that there were stones around the outside of the net to make the net even heavier. And the weight was so great, it pulled all the 9 heads down into the oozing mud of the swamp. And Hercules charged forward, drawing his sword and still holding the torch in his other hand. Now the heads fought free of the net, and they attacked Hercules from all sides. But he drove them back with his sword, one after another, and then he would see an opening and he would cut off a head. But before 2 new ones could grow there, he would burn that place with his torch so nothing could grow. At last only the unkillable head, the central head, was left, and fortunately the net had held that one down longest, and now as it rose up, it took in a great breath, so that when it breathed out, it could breathe its flames and burn Hercules. But before it could, Hercules took what was left of the net and wound it around the jaws of the beast so it couldn't open its mouth. And then Hercules lifted the entire Hydra up over his head and walked out of that swamp. And he walked right past the villagers who were hiding among the trees in terror. And then Hercules took the Hydra up the mountainside to the cave he had found that afternoon. He put the Hydra inside and unwound the net and ran out before the beast could turn on him. And then, using the boulders and rocks he had piled outside, he blocked the entrance to the cave. The villagers had followed him.
"What are you doing, Hercules?"
they asked. "Well," said Hercules, "I can't kill the Hydra. Not that head, anyway. But I can cage it up forever so it won't bother you anymore." Just then one of the villagers looked up and said,
"Fire! There's fire coming out of the mountainside."
"Don't worry," said Hercules. "There's an air hole into the cave so that the Hydra can breathe, but it's much too small for the Hydra to get out through it. Anyway, from time to time you may see some smoke or some fire there, but don't worry. And you know, to this very day, if you go to that part of Greece, there is a volcano there, and from time to time there is smoke or flame seen. And if you ask the people, they'll say, Oh, yes, that's just the old Hydra that Hercules put there so long ago, and he's still living inside the mountainside and breathing his fire and his smoke. Now, on his way back from fighting the Hydra, Hercules had another adventure. He was passing along the seacoast, and he found a village in which the people were very unhappy. It seems that one of the sons of the sea god Poseidon was terrorizing this village. This fellow could come out of the water and go back in and breathe there too, and he could turn himself into all sorts of shapes, and he'd taken it into his head to take whatever he wanted from the villagers, and they couldn't fight him, and they were terrified of his magic. "I'll help you," said Hercules. And the next time this fellow came out of the water, Hercules went up to him and he said, "Now listen, as one powerful fellow to another, don't you think you're taking advantage of your power?" "Well," said this fellow from the sea, "are you going to stop me?" "Well, I will," said Hercules, "if I have to. I'll wrestle you, and if I win, you leave the people alone." "And what if I win?" said the man from the water. "Well, then I'll go off and find a treasure for you that you can bring underwater with you and enjoy." "I'd like that. Very well, let's wrestle." But what Hercules had forgotten was that this wrestler could change shape. And in the first moment that Hercules grabbed him, this sea creature turned himself into a snake and began to wind around Hercules. But Hercules grabbed him, pulled him off, and cracked him like a whip. So quickly the sea creature turned into a lion. Roar! He leaped at Hercules, but Hercules had fought the Nemean lion and won. He was used to this. He grabbed the lion. Now to escape, the sea creature turned himself into a tiny fly. He flew out of Hercules' grasp, and then turned himself into a dragon. But Hercules had just fought a dragon, and a 9-headed dragon at that, the Hydra. And he grabbed the dragon by the jaws and began to squeeze. Once again, the sea creature turned himself into a fly to escape. This time, Hercules was ready for him. He grabbed the creature in one hand and shut his hand and began to shake his hand very, very quickly, while the poor fellow inside shouted, "Help! Help! Let me out! Stop! Stop shaking me! I surrender!" And so Hercules put down the dizzy fly, which turned back into the sea creature again. The poor fellow stood up and spun around, he was so dizzy, and he said, I'll never do it again, Hercules. Now point me in the direction of the water and help me home, will you?" And Hercules did, and then he went on his way back to King Eurystheus to do more labors. The next labor was to fight the Erymanthian boar.
"This is a huge wild boar, and it is hurting the farmers of Erymanthia," said King Eurystheus. "With its sharp tusks and its huge weight, it is cutting them and running over them and trampling their fields and their crops. So you shall go and fight it, Hercules, but you shall not kill it this time. Bring it to me living."
So off Hercules went once again with a "Yes, your majesty." But again on his way he thought, how am I going to do this? It's one thing to fight a wild boar. A wild boar is sort of like a second cousin to a pig, but much larger, and it's all muscle. And wild boars have terrible tempers and sharp, pointed tusks. It's one thing to fight a boar, as I say, but another thing to pick it up alive. When he got to the area where the boar lived, he found the boar liked to live on a mountainside. So Hercules went to one of the farms at the foot of the mountain, and he said to the farmer's wife, "Good mother, I've come to rid you of this terrible beast."
"Aye, Hercules," she said. "I recognized you right off, I did. How may I help you?"
"Well, I need to borrow something from you. Some pots and pans."
"Oh, Hercules," she laughed. "You don't look much like a cook to me."
No, it's not to cook the boar with. Well, you'll see. Just may I borrow the pots and pans?"
"Of course, here they are."
And off Hercules went, and he tracked down the wild boar. But that boar took one look at Hercules coming for him and turned around and ran for his mountain. Hercules came running after, and he started banging the pots and pans together. Bang, bang, clang, clang, clatter, clatter. Bang, bang, clang, clang, clatter, clatter. The boar hated that loud noise, and he hated having Hercules after him, so he ran faster, back up to the mountainside. Bang, bang, clang, clang, clatter, clatter, went the pots and pans, and the boar raced up the mountain itself. Bang, bang, clang, clang, clatter, clatter. It still heard that dreadful noise behind it, and soon ran up so high that it ran to the top of the mountain where there was snow on the ground. And the boar ran out into the snow to get away from the loud noise, and it got stuck in the snow. Hercules came up and saw it there, and he set down the pots and pans. And with his longer human legs, he walked out into the snow, and he picked the boar up and tied it up with the long length of rope he had brought with him just for this use. And then retrieving the pots and pans, he went back down with that boar slung across his shoulders.
Oh, it was worth missing my pots and pans for a day just to see you carrying that dreadful thing off.
Thank you. Thank you for the use of the pots and pans. But on his way back to King Eurystheus with the living Erymanthian boar, Hercules decided to play a joke on the king. That king is a coward, thought Hercules. I think he sends me on these dangerous missions partly because he himself is so afraid, and he envies me for my courage and my strength. Well, I'll turn this one right back on him. And so he took the boar back to the king's throne room and untied it and set it loose inside. And then he went and found the king and said, "Your Majesty, I've brought back the Erymanthian boar, and it's waiting for you in your throne room." King Eurystheus went there, thinking that the boar would be tied up or in a big wooden cage. Instead, when he opened the door, there was the Erymanthian boar. And the king screamed in terror and ran up the hallway until he saw a large jar in which he stored olive oil, and he leaped in and pulled the lid down tight. Hercules laughed very hard, and then he took the boar and set it in the royal zoo, and there it lived out its days in a large open pen with plenty to eat. Well, after King Eurystheus faced the Erymanthian boar, face to face, I think he decided not to ask Hercules to bring any more animals home. Instead, he gave him another kind of a mission, an even more difficult labor.
You shall go to our neighboring country, and there find King Aegeus. Now, King Aegeus has a huge stable in which he keeps 30,000 cows, and he has not cleaned this stable for 30 years, Hercules. You can imagine how filthy it is in there.
Yes, Your Majesty, I can.
Well, soon you shall know, for it is your job now to clean the stable of Aegeus. Let's see how you do that, strong man.
But Hercules found a way. He went to the stable of Aegeus, and he climbed a nearby hill, and he noticed that there was a huge river flowing nearby. And so coming back down to the hill, he found King Aegeus and introduced himself. "Your Majesty, I am Hercules." "Hercules, of course I have heard of you. You are welcome in our land, my son." "Your Majesty, King Eurystheus sent me here to clean your stable." "Clean the stable? I'm afraid it's impossible, even for you, Hercules." "Well, I think I've figured out a way to do it. If you and your people can take all the cows out tomorrow, take them away to graze, then by the time you return at sunset, I think I can offer you a clean stable." The king just shook his head in wonder, but he said he would do it. And so the next morning, as the sun was rising, King Aegeus and his people took all the 30,000 cows away, and Hercules went to work. He had found himself a huge pointed rock, and he walked over to the edge of the river a half-mile away and stuck the point in the ground. And then he dug a new channel for the river. That is, he cut a groove in the earth running all the way from the river over to the entrance of the stable of Aegeus, and right down the middle of the stable and out the other end, and then he curved that groove back to the river again. And then he blocked up the flow of the river, and soon the water poured into the channel that he had cut in the earth. And it poured through the stable and swept away all the filth, while Hercules himself looked in the window to watch how it was going. And when he decided the stables were clean, he went back to the river, and he blocked up the channel he had cut, and he let the river flow the way that it used to. And so it was that at the end of the day, as Aegeus and his people came back with their cows, they found Hercules sitting, looking very relaxed, outside of the stable, and they found a sparkling, clean stable inside. At last, King Eurystheus said,
I have one more labor for you, Hercules. You shall bring me the golden apples of the Hesperides.
Now the Hesperides were 3 sisters, cousins of the gods, who lived in a garden far to the west in Spain, and there they had a magical tree which grew golden apples, and they protected the tree, and a dragon also helped to protect it. Hercules went searching for the garden of the Hesperides, but he could not find it. And then he had an idea. If he could not find the 3 Hesperides, he would find their brother. Their brother was easy to see, for he was a giant. His name was Atlas, and Atlas lived on the northern coast of Africa, and it was his job, given to him by the gods, to hold up the earth on his shoulders. Well, that's what the Greeks said. They had to find some way of explaining why the earth didn't seem to just drop through space, and they said that the giant Atlas held it on his shoulders. Hercules found Atlas standing there with his head scraping the clouds, and he told Atlas how he needed the golden apples of the Hesperides. And from his huge height above, Atlas called down, I should be happy to get you the apples, Hercules, for you cannot get them yourself. I could not give you directions to the garden. Unfortunately, I cannot set down the earth while I go to see my sisters, for no one else is strong enough to hold it. Well, now this was a challenge to Hercules, and he said, I know I'm not as big as you are, Atlas, but I think I could hold the earth for a while, if you don't mind getting the apples. Very well. Here. And slowly and gently, Atlas handed off the earth and set it on Hercules' shoulders. It had to be slow and gentle because they didn't want to cause any floods or earthquakes. At last, Hercules had the earth on his shoulders. This is heavy, he said. Please hurry back. Of course, Hercules, said Atlas, and he went off with huge steps that covered a mile at a time. In about 3 hours, Atlas was back. He had gone all the way to Spain and gotten the apples and come back to northern Africa. And he set the apples down, but then he said, You know, Hercules, while I was away, I thought, I have grown tired of holding the earth on my shoulders. And now that you can do it, I think I will leave the earth to you. Now, this is not what Hercules wanted to hear. And besides, he knew that this was Atlas's job, given to him by the gods. And so he said to Atlas, You know, Atlas, the joke is on me. But do one thing for me before you leave, will you? You know, I'm not used to this, and the earth is rubbing against the back of my neck and making a terrible blister. Now, I have a blanket in my backpack over there, and if I could just set the blanket down between the earth and my neck, I'd be all right. Just take the earth back for a moment while I get the blanket ready, will you? Of course, said the giant, and he took the earth back. But once Hercules had handed the earth back, he said to Atlas, I'm sorry, Atlas. This is your task, set by the gods, not mine. But thanks for the apples. And even Atlas had to laugh. Well, I guess you turned the joke back on me, Hercules. And so Hercules took the apples back to the king. Then Hercules said to King Eurystheus, Your Majesty, I have served you a long time now, and I feel that at last I can say that I use my strength wisely, and therefore I shall bid you farewell, for that is what the god Apollo told me to do. And I must say, in all fairness, that King Eurystheus in the end said,
Thank you, Hercules. You have given me a great opportunity no other king shall ever have enjoyed. I hope that you have good luck.
and Hercules went on his way. Now he had many other adventures and helped many other people. But perhaps the strangest and most amazing of all the adventures he had after the labors were through was this one. On his journeys, he was staying with some friends, a husband and wife. The husband's name was Admetus, and the wife Alcestis. During the night, as Hercules slept in their home, the beautiful wife Alcestis died. Now the next morning, Hercules, who knew nothing of all this, came down and found his host Admetus there, and laughed and joked with him, not knowing the pain that his friend was feeling. For in those days, a host was not supposed to share his unhappiness or his grief, but only to make his guest feel happy and comfortable. But Hercules soon figured out that there was something wrong just from the way his friend looked, and he had one of the servants tell him what had happened. "Our lady Alcestis died during the night," said the old servant. "And I have been laughing and joking with Admetus all morning. What a fool I am," said Hercules. And as usual, when he had done something that he thought was wrong, he decided to make up for it. And then he went to the tomb where the body of Alcestis lay, and he went inside, and he waited, and soon there came the god Hades. Now you remember that the Greeks believed in many gods and goddesses, and Hades was a god of death, and he had come for the soul of Alcestis. But he found Hercules there too, and Hercules said, "Hades, I want Alcestis back alive. I'll wrestle you for her soul."
"And if you lose, Hercules?"
said Hades. Hercules shivered. He didn't like that voice, but he said, "If I lose, you may take me too." And so they wrestled. Now, we don't know exactly what happened inside that tomb, but the servants said they heard a lot of crashing and some screams. We do know what happened at the end, though. For after the noise had stopped, there was a knocking on the big front door of the house. And Admetus and the servants came out from where they'd been hiding, and Admetus opened the door, and there he found his beloved wife, Alcestis, alive and breathing like you or like me. And Hercules? He was already on his way down the road to his next adventure. Now, when Hercules himself died, he didn't wrestle Hades for his own soul. For the gods accepted Hercules up among them, and they let him eat their food, ambrosia, and drink their drink, nectar, so that he became immortal like them. And then they made him into a constellation. That is, one of those patterns of stars you can see in the sky at night that seems to make the outline of a picture. And there Hercules is, still, up there in the night sky, still holding his club, and looking down each night upon the earth that once he held upon his own strong shoulders. You know, there are many other Greek myths and many books about them. So if you liked these stories, you might want to go to your local library or bookstore, and there you may gather for yourself your own golden apples.
Okay, so this was the Adventures of Hercules. Did you think it was interesting, Zena? I thought it was, but it's very different than when I was a child. The story was vastly different from the story that it is now. When I read Hercules as a child, it was Hercules actually instead of hurting a man, he actually killed his family, and that's why he had to do the labors. And there were more labors than, I think they only discussed 4. I think there were 7 or 12 labors. I'm not exactly sure.
What is labor?
Like the things that he had to do. You know, he had to catch the boar.
4 or 5 labors.
Yeah, I think it was more than that though.
7.
It could be 7 or 12. I have to find out, but
8.
I'm pretty sure it was more. Okay, so we're gonna have some questions as usual to answer. And okay, so these are very easy questions. What was the name of the strongest ancient Greek hero?
Hercules.
Hercules. Can we say that? Can we repeat that?
Hercules.
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 There was another person that I have trouble. The queen, the queen of Egypt.
You mean Hatshepsut?
So she knows how to pronounce Hatshepsut, and I don't. What did you say it again? Say it again. Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut.
Yeah. So she knows how to say that, and me, I know how to say Heracles and Hercules. Can you say it?
Hercules.
Hercules.
I thought you also can say Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar, right? Another pharaoh of Egypt. No, he wasn't a pharaoh. He was a king of Babylon, right? Okay, so who was Hercules' father? Do you remember? Who was Hercules' father? Do you remember? Okay, he was his father was a god, remember? So who's the strongest god in Mount Olympus? Who's the strongest god? The leader of the gods.
Zeus.
Right. Zeus is his father. Remember what I told you? Okay. Zeus is his father, right? After Hercules got very angry and hurt a man, what did the god Apollo tell him to do?
To go to the king and do whatever the king told him to.
Right. And Apollo is the he's the god of the sun. Okay? We didn't discuss that, but Apollo is the god of the sun.
For Greeks?
Mm-hmm. Tell me about one of the labors of Hercules. Tell me about one of the labors of Hercules.
The king tell him to beat the dragon, the 9-head dragon.
What is the 9-head dragon's name? It's called the Hydra.
Hydra.
Yes. And what happens with the Hydra?
He used a net and he caught it.
But what happens to the head of the Hydra if you cut it off?
It grew 2 more.
It grows 2 more, right? So how did he stop the 2 heads from growing?
He put the fire. He used the fire and put it on the head before it could grow a new one.
Right, and we call that cauterizing.
Cauterize.
To cauterize something, that means when you, if I have a very big cut, it's very big, it's very open cut, and I don't want it to bleed anymore. I will take some fire and I will burn it so it won't bleed, so it can close.
Wow.
It will hurt a lot, but you can do that. Maybe you light a stick on fire and then you put it on your cut and it will, or you light a knife and you put it on your cut and it will stop bleeding. It will hurt a lot though. Okay. Excuse me. Um, According to the myth, what job did Atlas do?
Atlas.
Yeah. Do you remember Atlas? What did he was holding what? What did Atlas hold?
The earth.
Right. So Atlas held the earth, right?
If you don't help the earth will fall.
Okay, so yeah, so he held the earth on his what?
On his shoulder.
Very good. From the name of the Greek god Atlas, we get the word for a book full of maps to show us what the world looks like. This book is called an atlas.
Atlas?
Yeah, it's like a magazine. Like, not a magazine, actually. A big, giant book, like a dictionary. And when you open it, it has the maps of many of the worlds. Okay? It has maps of many countries, the world. Okay? In different time periods. We can click on this.
Answer key.
This is so relaxing that I am getting tired. See, he held the world on his shoulders. Zeus, king of the gods. Apollo told Hercules to go to work for a king and do all the jobs the king told him to do. These chores are called the labors of Hercules. Okay, so today we heard a story about two Greek heroes. One was named Perseus and the other was named Hercules.
Hercules.
Two of these pictures are of Perseus and two are of Hercules. Decide which they are. Okay? So, let's click on this.
Oh, I do that. I do the Perseus one, but I didn't do that.
So, which one do you think is Perseus? Which one are Hercules?
These are Perseus, and these are Hercules.
These two. So, why are the two on the top of Perseus? How do you know?
Because he has the thing that the gods give him to kill Medusa.
What did the gods give him?
A mirror shield
Mm-hmm.
and two shoes that can fly.
Can you remember who gave him the shoes that fly? What's his name? Maybe it's hard to remember. His name was Hermes.
Hermes.
Yeah, Hermes is. I think he's the god of to give messages to the gods, and he's very fast. And who gave him the shield?
I don't know.
Who gave? Yeah.
Athena.
Very good. And why did she give him the shield?
So he don't need to look at Medusa's face.
Okay. So in the fourth picture, who is Hercules fighting?
He's fighting
the Hydra, right? He's fighting the Hydra. Yeah? How do you know it's the Hydra?
Because it got 9 heads.
And what about this one?
He's fighting the bull.
The boar. Well, they call it a boar, but this one it shows it's the bull. I guess because the stories change a lot, so it depends on what you're reading, right?
They look like snakes.
Yeah, they were snakes, I think. So, I think this concludes the lesson for today. Hercules was really long, 30 minutes. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Homeschooling with Zena. And my name is Randy, and this is Zena, and we say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Where's the stop?